All right, so what we need to do next is we need to clarify the terminology and the different components of gender. Now, there's a lot of moving parts to this, and there's a lot of words. So I put this together in a way that I hope is very clear. I know some of you have not seen that movie yet, and so I want to talk about that movie a little bit, and we'll go right into gender and start breaking down the components so we can take a deep dive into these guest interviews. Now, I really liked the way that this movie started. It really was brilliant and probably my favorite part of the whole thing. You know, this movie starts out at Matt's kid's birthday party. So it's his own children. He has twins, one boy, one girl. Beautiful family, just very wholesome. Everything was pure. It was just such a beautiful illustration as you know, contrasting the behavior, the connections, the relationships, the communication, the different worlds that the masculine and the feminine energy vibrated at. And I really, really appreciated that because it was such a clear and obvious example as to the different behaviors of boys and girls. And you know, Matt said, "Look, some people don't think that there's a difference between boys and girls, and those people are idiots or males and females, something like that." And I've never met anybody who didn't think that there was a difference to two. But regardless, this was a very good illustration as to the difference in behavior. We're talking about, you know, expression and behavior. This is what it's talking about. So, you know, it starts off with you got the twins' birthday party. You got a blue side of the cake, you know, with astronauts, you know, and stuff. And you got the pink side that's got flowers and it's got a, you know, little princess tiara and it says princess on the plates. And, you know, so two totally different energies, even just from the cake. So then it shows, you know, the groups of kids. You got his son and that group, and they've got, you know, footballs and BB guns and fishing poles and all this stuff. And you have the girls over here, and they're opening tea sets and Barbie dolls and tiaras and hair stuff and all of these things. And it was really, even though it's probably scripted and the whole deal, it doesn't matter. It was such a great illustration. Even the reaction from the kids and the friends as they open the gifts, you know. The boy picks up the fishing pole and he's like this, and his buddy's looking at it and he's just like, oh my gosh. You know, he's thinking, his eyes are like, we're going to be catching sharks with that thing. You know, they're seeing sharks on the other end of that. And the girls are over there, and they're, you know, she opens up a tea set. And, you know, all her friends are like looking at that, and it's, you know, super exciting. They're looking at hair products and all of these things. You know, I can't imagine what the reaction would have been if he would have opened up a tea set, you know, and his buddy looked at that. His buddy probably would have still been super excited. He'd have been like, yes, targets. We got targets for our BB gun. This is fantastic, you know. And there was one part that I thought was really funny where, you know, they both got fishing poles. His is wrapped in blue wrapping paper and hers is wrapped in pink wrapping paper. And she picks it up, and as she's picking it up, she's kind of got this look on her face like, you know, have you seen these movies, maybe these detective movies or murder movies or whatever it is, where there's a clairvoyant and they like touch a piece of evidence and then they instantly get to experience something involving that. It was like that. It was like this clairvoyant moment. She's picking it up, and at the same time she's picking it up, she's seeing herself baiting a live worm on that hook and just driving it through the body. And, you know, it's like she just had her first experience with that fishing pole, and it's not even out of the wrapper yet. So it was just very interesting to see what they connected with and what they was exciting to them. Two very different worlds. One resonated with a very masculine energy, and one resonated with a very feminine energy. You know, and Matt made the comment, man, give my son a BB gun, and that's all the emotional support he needs. But my girl, on the other hand, that's a whole different story. So, you know, there are definitely different behaviors or expressions, and there's definitely a much different internal workings and processors as well. And it was just a really solid illustration of that. So we're going to break apart all of these things. Now, I want to take that scenario just a little bit further, and it's going to mean more maybe than Matt thought that it would. And I hope you will go back and watch the movie again after you watch this review. But imagine, if you will, with this perfect little family in this perfect little world, if Matt had another son, maybe, I don't know, a couple years younger. And while all this activity is going on, the son is over here with the girls and is just very connected to what is going on over here with the princess stuff and the tea sets and the Barbie dolls and all this. And let's say that this son was just super interested in this world more so than the brother's world, right? Now, what does that mean? Because that is an experience that that the parents of trans kids go through, a lot. And I know a lot of you are saying, oh no, my kid played with Barbie dolls when they were, 6 years old and I didn't have a problem and they grew right out of it. Exactly. That is my point. That everybody has different tolerances and different things that they connect to. And one thing by itself is not an indicator of anything, but what that would indicate is that that child is very comfortable in that energy, in that vibration, in that world. That there is a tolerance there for that child that not all children are going to have. So let's say then that a couple years later that child didn't grow out of it. And what that child is expecting for that same birthday is tea sets and tiaras and Barbie dolls and all of those things. Then what? Then what are you going to do at that point? Because that is the scenario that so many trans parents are in. Now, unfortunately, we didn't get to talk to any or hear from any of those parents to help us understand what that experience was. And there are, of course, a lot of them everywhere. In fact, you should, if you get a chance, you should look at a podcast called How to Be a Girl by Marlo Mack. And it is one of the sweetest podcasts that you'll hear. And it's this amazing single mother with this little child. I don't know, the child was probably 3 or 4 when she started, making this podcast and talking to this child and whatever. And then this podcast follows it all the way up, I think through high school. And they're very, very short clips. They're only, some of them are 5 minutes or 7 minutes. So they're very, very short. But listening to the dialogue and listening to this incredible mother who doesn't understand a lick of this or what's good for this kid, just try to help this child negotiate life and negotiate all of the people that are just making that child's life difficult. And it is such a great podcast. I would strongly encourage you to go watch How to Be a Girl by Marlo Mack. And man, if that doesn't make you stop and think a little bit and think about how difficult of a spot these parents are in. But let's say that your child now is expecting those things. Now what do you do? Is that child now deviant, evil? I mean, are they bad? Do you, at this point, do you need to turn to your pastor or whoever your church people are and say, hey, look, I think we've got a problem. I got a kid that's just not snapping out of this. He wants to live in this other world. I don't know what we're going to do with this. Like, what do you do? Exactly. Now it's been several, years, and this child just wants to present a certain way. And if they're not in that world, then they're unhappy and they're unresponsive and they're angry and they're belligerent and they just won't grow, right? How many years would you let that child be in that state before you said, fine, wear what you want, but be happy and be responsive and be part of the family and live your life? Like, how long would you let your child suffer? Would you think you can shame it out of them? You think you can beat it out of them? What exactly do you think that looks like? So let's say that child goes on a little bit more, another couple years, and is even more committed to this world and even less interested in this other boy world that you thought that they were going to have. Then what do you do? Now you're at a point where puberty's coming on and this child is super athletic, but super girly, right? You've got a choice to make as far as what you're going to do hormonal wise. So if they're already out of balance where they are now, feeding that child the wrong hormone is not going to be good for the temperament of that child. But now that's not an option, of course, in your state, Matt, because you can't care for somebody that's living outside of your gendered expectations, right? Well, how do you handle that at the school? When you take your child to school, and all your child would wear is dresses. Now, how do you approach your teacher? How do you approach the school and deal with that situation, right? Especially with what, the message that you're putting out, that everybody is groomers and whatever else. But it's your child. You didn't groom them. You have no idea. They were raised exactly like all the other kids, but they are connecting to a different world altogether. So that would be a more accurate experience of what a transgender child-parent relationship would look like and the decisions and choices they would have to make. Now, let's break down some of this gender ideology and let's just break apart the components of gender. Now, in order to do this, when we're talking about gender expression and gender and sex and biology, and we've got to break it all apart. So in order to do that, I had to use words. I had to use words that had a masculine tone, and I had to use words that had a feminine tone, right? These are just stereotypes. Please do not get caught up on the words. All I am doing is using a contrast, and this is a contrast that I didn't have to spend very much time on, right? I could just Google, behavior stereotypes, gendered behavior stereotypes or something, and then it gives you, all of these contrasts. So if you don't like the words that I used, then substitute your own. It's not about the words. In fact, I left spots in there for you to put your own words in. I'm trying to help you understand a concept. I'm not trying to tell you that any word means any particular thing, so please don't get caught up in that. Again, I am not a doctor, I'm not a psychiatrist, I'm not a family therapist. I'm none of that. I'm simply a person who's been living a transgender life for 27 years and spent most of my time trying to figure it out. So let's try to put a vocabulary to some of these different issues so that we can deep dive into some of these interviews. All right, so we've got the male and the female. We've got the very masculine, behavior. They got the BB guns. They're brave. There's valor. There's this. Then you have the girls over here, which is very sensitive and soft, and flowers and tiaras, and they're pretty, and it's about makeup, and it's about all of these gentle, nurturing things. So you've got different behaviors over here. That doesn't mean that this person doesn't have this behavior. That's not what I'm saying. I'm simply saying, stereotypically, there are different behaviors for a masculine versus feminine. That's all. All right, so let's throw this out there very, very quickly. So you got the male, you got the female, you got the masculine, you got the feminine. Now, Matt asked Jordan Peterson, he said, what is the difference between sex and gender? To which Jordan Peterson replied, well, sex is about biology. It's about biology. And gender, well, gender is not a good word. Gender is not a good word because it's not measurable. People are using the word gender, but they don't really mean gender. They're really talking about temperament. So temperament is really what they intend to say. He said, and my guess is that let's say that 10% of women have the temperament of a man. That's not everybody, but you can have a masculine or feminine temperament. I think that might be a little bit high, but I don't know. He is, a doctor. I am not a doctor. 10% seems high. But it does pose the question, okay, so that 10% you're talking about, do they get to live the life that's right for them? Do they get to engage in the things that they're drawn to? Do they get to connect with the things that are important to them, with the nature and temperament that they have? Isn't that the question? Because we are taking people's health care and medical rights and parenting and everything away over somebody's temperament not being what we want it to be. Now that's kind of weird. So sex is biological, and gender, well, and when we're talking about biology, we gotta talk about hormones. We have to throw in hormones here because that's a really big deal. We keep hearing about cross-sex hormones, chemical castration, all of that stuff. So when we're talking about biology, it is important to talk about hormones. Hormones are just biological compounds that influence everything from your metabolism to your behavior. That's what hormones do. So you've got sex, which is biological. You got hormones, which is very, very important. Now, it is also important to understand that every person has the same hormones in their body. The females don't have different hormones than males do, from my understanding. Again, I'm not a doctor, but the ratios are different. The ratios are much different. The DNA almost comes pre-calibrated to maintain a certain level of sex hormone, but you need both sex hormones in your system. So males have estrogen or estradiol in their system as well. However, their primary or dominant sex hormone is going to be testosterone. So they have, both. So girls, on the other hand, they also have both, but they have, they're top heavy or, stronger in estrogen than they are testosterone. That is the chemical combination. Everybody has both of those chemicals in there. Now, it is important, I think, to understand that prior to puberty, the chemical makeup of the boys and the girls are actually very, very similar. I think until, I don't know, 5, 6, 7, I think that they may actually have the same chemistry. But, when you get up close to puberty, what happens at puberty is that the testes will secrete 20 times more testosterone than the girl's body's going to produce. 20 times more. And what that produces is 15 times the free-floating testosterone in the body. So that testosterone is going around and it's making, big bones and strong muscles and wide jaws and huge knuckles and, just all of those features that boy's going to need to punch through that, world. That masculine world is more of a shock and awe, blunt force trauma kind of a reality, And so it gives you that physical ability to punch through what you got to punch through. And on the other side, the estrogen is the same thing. But this is one of the reasons why sports, it just can't happen, because 20 times the testosterone does things to your body. There's no way that you can say that it doesn't. Now, does that mean that all trans women have an advantage in sports? No, it doesn't mean that. Does it mean they do mostly? No, it doesn't mean that either. It may not be that often at all. But the reality is there is a propensity somewhere at some point to have an advantage. And so if an advantage is possible, then the advantage has to be eliminated. That's fair athletics. If it's not fair, then it's not athletics. It's just, there's no competition. It's just practice. So it is important to understand the effect that these hormones have on the body, for sure. Now, going back to Jordan Peterson and gender is temperament, right? What is temperament? Temperament is, well, it's a person or it's an animal's nature, especially as it permanently affects their behavior. That's what your temperament is. So your temperament is the inside stuff, where your expression is the outside stuff. Boy, no, I'm not even using examples. Forget it. But it's how you feel on the inside, okay? Now, I put words together here as an example. Don't get caught up in the words for Pete's Peppers. I'm telling you. Okay, so let's say you had, this expression of this behavior. So now we've got your behavior expression. You've got your gender, which is your nature or your temperament, over here. And you got your hormones up there driving both the temperament and your body, the biology. That's where we are right there so far. Now, when you have, let me go back there. When you have testosterone in the body, it's going to make the body form a certain way. And that shape is going to be, the shape of a man. And the girl's testosterone is going to change her body in ways that are congruent for what she is going to experience, in her reality. That's the purpose of these hormones. So they're to balance both the physical body and the temperament, for sure. Now, you're going to also have different routines for each of these people. So you got two different worlds, you got two different routines, you got completely different nature altogether. And so we have restrooms that are separated by, of course, men and women, masculine, feminine, but you're going to go into the restroom that best aligns with the routines of your life. That's how it's set up. We didn't set up restrooms based on chromosomes. We didn't, when restrooms got set up, we didn't even understand chromosomes or XY or XX. So it was never based on chromosomes, and never probably in the history of bathrooms has someone said, hey, let me take a look at the good stuff before you come in here. Right? That probably hasn't either. There's no check like that. So you go into the restroom that is equipped for the routine of your life. And that's how this is divided. It is a social gender issue. That's how it has been. That's how it always has been. I've been using the women's restroom when I'm dressed for a very, very long time. So is every single one of the trans. We just went over the numbers as far as how many trans people there are. They're using the restroom, and we haven't ever heard anything about it until all of a sudden social media and these accusations. So we're going to get more into the bathrooms in just a minute. Let me keep going for a second. Don't get too caught up yet. I know some of you are already angry with the words, so substitute your own. That's good enough. Now, I don't want you to think at all that I'm saying, oh no, this person can't have these characteristics. That is actually the exact opposite of what I'm saying. The reality is, you could be a very girly girl and still be very independent or aggressive or less initiating or, brave, protect, all of those things. It doesn't matter. You could be all, whatever your combination is who you are, right? That combination is your specialness. That's what makes you unique. You could be a very, boy, but still be very, kind of patient or passive. You could be very sensitive, emotional, nurturing, oh my gosh, romantic and tender, right? That is your specialness. That combination is what makes you you. And everywhere you go in your life, that is your social thumbprint. You've left a social thumbprint on the universe everywhere you've gone. Now, different scenarios, different, resources, different people, different stresses, but you still use that specialness, that combination of you. That is who you are. We definitely would never ask somebody, oh, your social thumbprint, nah, it's just not good enough. We're not going to allow you to leave your social thumbprint on the universe. All of those characteristics, that is where your strength comes from. That's where your passions, your ambitions, your best work lies somewhere in your nature and your desires, and what is comfortable and important to you. So to tell somebody, what? No, your temperament is just not what I expected it to be. I need you to feel less about that in order to be comfortable with you. When did we start to think that we get to govern somebody else's temperament and just erase their social thumbprint off the universe? Like they don't have a right to leave their mark of who they are and what their passions and what their strengths are. That's an absurd thing. But anyway, let's keep going nonetheless. Now, what is this assigned at birth stuff? When do we start saying assigned at birth and why? It can feel annoying, right? Like, why are we saying assigned male at birth? They're male. Okay, there it is. Well, kind of, but kind of not as well. See, because here's the problem. The problem is that about 1 in 2,000 people are born with a reproductive system that's not exactly obvious. And in those moments, a doctor has to assess that child and make an assignment as to the sex that child is. They're going to use their experience, they're going to use their knowledge, they're going to use their intuition, and they are going to assign a sex to that child. And whatever assignment is made, that will be the standard of the development of that child. Boys and girls, they develop differently. A boy is going to grow a lot faster, and their weight is going to be measured differently. And then it takes a boy 12 or 13 months to triple their body weight, where it takes a girl like 15 months to triple her weight. So it is important that assignment is correct, just so they can accurately gauge the development of that child. But that is why there is assigned at birth. So now we've got assigned at birth right there. Now, for these children that are born different, if you will, they're just born different. Now, I know Matt does not believe in this. He does not believe in intersex. However, as much as you don't want to believe in something, there is a thing called intersex. And intersex is just a general term, and it's used for a variety of conditions in which a person is born with a reproductive or sexual anatomy that doesn't seem to fit the typical definition of male or female or male. For example, a person might be born appearing to be female on the outside, but having mostly male-typical anatomy on the inside. Or a person may be born with genitals that seem to be in between the usual male and female types. Or maybe a person may be born with a mosaic genetics, so that some of their cells have an XX chromosome and some have an XY chromosome. So that is why we have assigned at birth, because it isn't always that obvious. Now, when we're talking about intersex, like what are the numbers? What are we talking about here? And I don't want to get caught up in all this. I'm giving you some statistics as a baseline for you to do your own research on. These numbers I'm about to give you, it's from WebMD and also from ISNA.org, which is the Intersex Society of North America. So these are not my numbers, they're their numbers. I'm simply giving you this information, as a baseline for your own research. So that is That is the numbers on that. And you can go through and read there a whole bunch of different things. It's actually very interesting to go through and read that. But, that's what's going on. I don't think that we get to say that that person doesn't exist. They absolutely exist. So, boom, there you have it. So when we're talking about intersex, what kind of combinations are we talking about? I mean, gosh, sex is pretty easy, right? There's an XY and there's an XX. And it should be that simple. And to a lot of people, it is that simple. The problem is, what we now understand is, there's also just one X. There's a 1X syndrome. There is a XY. So now we understand that there are girls, genetic girls running around that have an XY chromosome combination. We also understand that there are boys running around with an XX combination. It's interesting. We only learned this back in 2006. So it really wasn't long ago that we, made these discoveries. But there's also this one and this one and this one and this one and this one. So there are a whole bunch of genetic combinations. Is it the majority of people? I don't think so. No, I think it's probably a pretty small number, but I don't know. We're not doing enough karyotype testing to really know what these numbers are. Again, we're just barely figuring out all of the combinations. So it just wouldn't be fair to say that boys have an XY chromosome combination. It would be fair to say that maybe most boys or a lot of boys have that combination, but it wouldn't be fair to say all boys do. It's interesting. When I was doing my research, I thought to myself, how is it possible? How is it possible that a girl could have an XY chromosome? And I'm going to share with you what I found out. Again, I think it's true. I don't know. But this is the research I did. Again, I'm not a doctor. Go figure it out on your own. But this is what I understand as to what could cause that. So you've got your DNA strand, okay? You got your DNA strand, and there's a protein called SRY protein, which is going to weave itself through this protein strand of yours, right? Now, this SRY protein, what it's going to do, it's going to get kind of a little bit firm, a little bit more stiff. And as it gets a little more firm, then it starts to bend that chromosome over. And once that chromosome gets to 70 to 80 degrees, then the genitalia are going to form for a boy and all of those reproductive parts for a boy. But as it turns out, sometimes that SRY protein is, for whatever reason, slightly insufficient. And so it bends it and it gets to 60 and 65, 69, but it stops right there at 69 or 68. Somewhere it stops short. So boom, now what happens is the male genitalia, it just doesn't form, and so the body forms the girl parts, and there you have it. You have a little girl. Now what we don't know is what switches were turned on, between here and there. So this is, I don't know. I just thought that this was very fascinating. And so I'll put this up there for a second, but I don't know. I think this is pretty unique. I think that it would be safer to think of gender as opposed to being sex. It would be safer to think of this as a tuning fork. And this tuning fork is going to be duplicated in every cell throughout the body. And that frequency, whatever that tuning fork ends up at, is going to turn on a bunch of switches in that frequency. That's how I feel about it. Now, I don't know that that's mechanically sound. I don't know that we can prove that yet. But I think it would be safer to think of gender this way, that it's more about a tuning fork, and then you're going to resonate with the things that are in alignment with that frequency that you have. I think that is, whether it's right or wrong, I think that it's probably a good way to think about that, because my guess is it's something more along that line, is my guess. So let's get back to it. That is how a little boy could be a little girl. Now, excuse me, let's get into trans. So what is trans exactly? Well, trans means across, or to the other side of. That's all trans means. Transatlantic, to the other side of the Atlantic. That's what it means. So if by chance you had this XY biology, but you had that temperament, you just crossed over the gender barrier. So now you've got a feminine temperament with a masculine biology. You would be a trans woman. So woman is going to be directional. Trans because you crossed over, woman because that is the destination. That is the goal. That is the direction, trans woman. And conversely, if you had that biology and that temperament, then you're going to be a trans man for the exact same reason. It's man because it is directional. Think of it that way. It has nothing to do with biology. It has nothing to do with sexual reproduction. Thus, trans. Trans woman, trans man. Now, quite honestly, I don't even like the trans. I don't like the trans word at all. I don't like cisgender at all. Trans implies that you are entitled to a history of my genitalia, which is simply not true. So I don't really like that. But anyway, that is how you can remember it. Trans man, trans woman. Now, we're talking a lot about hormones. So now we got cross-sex hormones. Remember, you got your testosterone and your estrogen over here, and your estrogen, your testosterone over here. But when you have a temperament like that, and you have a biology like that, then where do the hormones go? What do you focus on when you're balancing the hormones for that individual? Because we know already that hormones affect everything from your metabolism to your temperament, your behavior. So it's going to affect both. So which one are we going to concentrate on? Because what Matt is saying is, oh no, we are not going to let you balance those hormones. So when we really do have to identify, what exactly, is up with the cross-sex hormones. So cross-sex hormones, it doesn't mean that they're introducing a hormone that is not already naturally in your body. We all have the same hormones, but at different ratios. So a cross-sex hormone is readjusting those ratios to feed the temperament and the body. So, quick question. When we're talking about do the hormones follow the body or the temperament, you kind of have to ask yourself, well, how do they balance the hormones? What do they use as the standard as to whether or not the hormone is effective? Well, that would be the temperament, right? Your temperament. You're going to the doctor, and we're going to get into hormones in a minute, but you go to the doctor, I'm sluggish, I'm tired, I don't have any energy, I'm lethargic, I'm sad, I'm lonely, I'm depressed, right? Your temperament is going to be the judge of where your hormones are, and they're gonna use your temperament. So think of the temperament as a thermometer, and think of the hormones as the thermostat. So you can adjust the thermometer based on the thermostat. So by telling somebody, you know what, we're actually not going to give you a thermostat. Instead of you adjusting the heat, you're going to need to just put on a blanket or maybe get some extra socks. I don't really know, but we're not going to allow you to have a balanced hormone or temperament, because that's chemical castration. Now let's talk about this stupid chemical castration for a minute, because he keeps saying this over and over and over. Chemical castration, great. Tell me what that is. Explain to me what chemical castration is. Who's that other person? Scott Nugent, or whatever his name was. Lupron. So let me explain how hormones work as I know it. Okay. So you've got the testosterone, you got the estrogen here. If what I was told is that if I didn't take a blocker, something to put a valve on the testosterone, if I increase the estrogen, then my body is already pre-wired to create that same ratio. So it's now going to produce a ton of testosterone in addition to having, more estrogen or estradiol in it. So you have to take a blocker, and what a blocker does is it's a valve that closes off that hormone so that you can have a different ratio to supply the temperament and the physical body. So it has to happen. It's not that you're chemically castrating anybody. I don't even know why is it true that they give Lupron to sex offenders? Yeah, they do give Lupron to some sex offenders. Do you know why? Is it because it chemically castrates them? No. It's because one of the side effects of Lupron is because it's putting a clamp on the testosterone, and the more Lupron you take, the tighter you can put the clamp. You take less, the clamp opens back up. But one of the side effects is that some people experienced less of a sex drive. So they decided with sexually deviant people, perhaps if we gave them this, maybe it would decrease their sex drive, and thus the appetite for, deviant sexual things. It's not because it chemically castrated him. That's stupid. Now, I don't take Lupron. I take something different called spirolactin, which does basically the same thing. It just keeps my testosterone at a certain level so that my body functions good. However, I still get the hormones to balance everything else. I remember I remember seeing something with Ben Shapiro, but he was talking about his grandfather, which I could tell he had a lot of affection for his grandfather, and just his struggle with some mental illness. I can't remember if it was schizophrenia or bipolar. I don't really remember what it is, but I just remember him talking about that and how difficult that life was, and how grateful he was that his grandfather took lithium, and that gave him a much more stable and predictable experience, and how grateful he was that that was available, and that he would have hated to see his grandfather's life without having. And I could tell that he cared deeply about his grandfather, and I appreciated that moment. But my question is the Daily Wire, are you guys the only ones that get to experience that same stability and predictable experience? We're literally going to take away whatever's available so that other people can have a much more stable and predictable experience? That's freedom to you? Really? That's right to you? That doesn't make any sense to me. Let me tell you something. Before I got on estrogen, I thought to myself, maybe if you got all teed up, testosterone up, maybe you would feel different. Maybe that would be it. And for, gosh, I don't know, maybe 2 years, I was on very high doses of testosterone. And so I was taking them either through injections or I was taking it through a pellet. It's like a grain of rice that they jab in your butt. And then that dissolves over time. And I did that. And I'll tell you what, those were 2 of the most miserable years of my life. I couldn't get to work without trying to pull somebody over that cut me off to beat them to death with a tire iron. Like, I could not have been more angry and edgy and less patient. I couldn't get, like, it literally turned me into the Hulk. I was miserable. I was those headaches, the migraines were daily. It was miserable. Once I started taking a very, very small dose of estrogen and put a little bit of a clamp on the testosterone, boom, I leveled right out. It doesn't affect my any kind of sexual functions or anything like that, but it still gives me the ability to be stable and calm and happy and all of those other things. So I would hate if estradiol was not available to me. That would be miserable for me, to live in that constant rage. That's not a state that was good for me, or that I would want to continue to live in. But I just think it's interesting that you realize, Ben, the value of stability and being mentally calibrated, chemically calibrated, but you're not interested in making that available to others. I think that's disappointing in itself. Anyway, back to it. So now we got the cross-sex hormones right there. Let's go back here. We've got the cross-sex hormones. So basically what you do is you would just swap those over. That's what cross-sex hormones mean. It means that you're not introducing something that wasn't always already there. It means you're calibrating the hormones so that it has an effect on the body and also on the temperament, or your mental capacity. And I hear a lot of, if you, in fact, I subscribe to a newsletter from the Endocrine Society, and I was doing a lot of research there on the effect of hormone therapy. And, it talked a lot about the bone density, going down and just different things. And, this is the big argument that people are saying. Well, there's danger to that. There's risk of that. Their bones are, if we give them hormone blockers before they hit puberty, their bones are going to stay small. They're not going to be big and strong and all of this stuff. So what you're saying is, if you gave them blockers, they're going to end up with the bone structure that they really want and need anyway. They're going to end up with a body that aligns with how they feel anyway? Well, that doesn't sound like much of a risk. Yeah, but it comes with, osteoporosis. Listen, let me tell you something. Everything comes with a risk. The Ritalin, all of the medicines you're taking for your mental health come with some risk and have some side effect. So you just got to decide, what price are you willing to pay for your mental stability? But I resent the fact that somebody else is willing to step in and say, no, I'm gonna determine what you're gonna pay for your mental health. No, I get to determine that, period. And if it gives me something, cancer, whatever, well, then that's the price I pay for happiness. I would much rather be happy for shorter than to live longer miserable. And my guess is that a lot of people feel that way. So I don't care about the side effects that you think may or may not happen. Now, they must have said a dozen times, there are no long-term studies on the effects. Okay, great. So let's not take that as that there's a lot of negative effects. Let's just take that as there are no long-term studies. So between here and the long-term study, I think I'm going to be happy and stable, and I think your kid or your person should also be able to be happy and stable. Are there risks? Yes, there's risks for everything. But let me ask you, Lupron is the main treatment for women who have endometriosis. I wonder if they say, look, now here's what we're going to do. We're going to give you a chemically castrating drug. Or Lupron is used a lot for people who have testicular cancer. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to give you a chemically castrating drug. I wonder if they take the same, approach to it. Because if you take those things away, those are two very, very significant issues. So did that Lupron do more good or did it do more damage? You don't know? Oh, weird that you're still talking about it then. So when we're talking about cross-sex hormones, that's kind of a farce because it implies that we're introducing something into the system that's not already there. It is already there. It's just there in different portions, and we just have to recalibrate those numbers right there. Now, let's get into, oh yeah, how about this meme right here? So I got this off of Facebook. The proper pronoun chart. Do you have a Y chromosome? Yes, he, him. Yeah, it's that simple. So going back here, is it that simple? Like really, is it that simple? Or is it not that simple? So when you get this and you decide, oh my gosh, here just proves more. I got to send this off to as many people as I can. Well, I'm telling you this for your own benefit. When you send that off, that's not demonstrating how simple it is. That's letting everybody else know how simple you are, because that is simply not the reality, and we've known that hasn't been the reality for quite a while. Okay, now let's get into non-binary. What the crap is this non-binary stuff? So we've got trans male, we've got trans female. What is non-binary? Is non-binary, is he that person? Are they the people that Matt's talking about that don't believe in male or female, that there's no difference? No, not at all. In fact, the opposite is true. Non-binary is someone who says, hey, listen, these are very, very important to me. But the reality is, that in itself just doesn't define me. Yes, I'm capable of that. That is me. But that's not all me. And if you called me that, then you would not be understanding me, because I feel just as connected over here as I do there. And the reality is, this is really probably more where I lie, where there are a lot of people that say, no, I was not built to live in this world. This world is not healthy for me. And that's where these kids are, some of these very small kids are coming out and just going, oh, no, pants aren't for me. That is not a world that I was built to endure. And so, and the words that kids use are also, I have found, very, very important as well. So if you've got a young child, again, I'm not a doctor, okay, this is just stuff that I've not stopped reading and learning and trying to figure this out for the last, at least 30 something years anyway. So I just have a lot of random information. And now I forgot even what I was saying. But anyway, this is where probably I lie right here. Oh, the little kids. So there's a difference when a little kid comes up and says, Mom and Dad, I am a girl. When someone says, I am a girl, it's different than someone who says, Mom and Dad, I feel like a girl. Like I like girl things, and I that comes natural, and I kind of want to be a girl. That is different. When someone says, I feel like a girl, well, there may be transition in that child's future. But a little child who comes out, like the child in, How to Be a Girl, comes out and says, I am a girl. And there's not going to be a transition in the future. They will never transition from being a boy, because they will never live as a boy. They will never think of themselves as a boy. And so there won't be a transition. What there's going to be is there's going to be an embracing. And the rest of your life is going to be spent trying to help this child fit in, and to try to have high self-confidence and high values and high morals, and not compromise who they are for the opinion of everybody else who just simply doesn't understand. So there is a difference in vocabulary, and I sure wish that Matt would have asked some of these doctors that he talked to during this, what does that vocabulary sound like? At what age do you start to hear it? When should you be concerned? What is the right response for these things? These are the conversations that we really need to understand, and we didn't. But anyway, so non-binary is not somebody who doesn't believe in gender. There's somebody that say, look, that doesn't describe me, and that's me. If you just refer to me he, then you don't know what I'm capable. If you called me a she, well, you wouldn't know what I'm capable of over here on the Kevin side of my life, because I'm pretty capable over there. So I'm extremely capable over here, and I'm extremely capable over here. I guess the difference is maybe I'm just a little bit happier over here. Now, I'm not going to get into it, but the bottom line is I'm not willing to surrender any of me because you don't understand all of me. That is the bottom line. So we got to decide, are we going to allow people to be exactly who they are, who they want to be? Are we going to allow them to connect with or have the temperament that they have? That's what we're going to have to agree or at least decide. But that's non-binary. So trans male, trans female, non-binary, cross-sex hormones, gender expression, gender or temperament. These are the different components that we're talking about. Now, when we're looking at these components right here, let's talk about where the deviance is in this. Okay, this is an important part, I think. So when we're talking about deviance, or is the female side inherently deviant? Is the masculine side inherently deviant? At what point does a child or anybody have to feel this much over here, and suddenly they've just, boop, you've crossed the line, you're now deviant? People use the word evil. Some people at Daily Wire have referred to the transgender community or issue as evil. People at Fox News have used the word evil regarding the subject. Politicians use the word evil all the time and try to sway that Christian vote. Churches will use derogatory language towards the transgender issue, and even advertise that they are non-affirming and will withhold support. That's interesting. So we need to really ask the question then, what is affirming mean? What does affirming mean? Well, as it turns out, affirming means to support someone by giving approval, recognition, or encouragement. So to support someone by giving approval, recognition, or encouragement. So if we go back to this slide right here, what part of that do you not affirm? Which part of somebody are you saying, nope, you can't feel that, I'm not going to affirm that? So I think that it would be very, very helpful for the churches if they would just, tell us exactly what is that 2T for J, what is that moment? What is that 2 trans for Jesus moment? How many feel-goods is just too many feel-goods? But I want to ask you this, and I'm talking to the churches here, and this is so important that they understand. Now, there's been a lot of research done, and a lot of research now shows that the human brain takes social rejection the same way, or processes social rejection the same way that it processes physical pain. And it's really fascinating, some of the tests they did to come to that conclusion. Here's one of the tests that I thought was fascinating. So they take this group of people and they give them those VR sets, the virtual reality stuff. And what they're doing, they break them up and they're playing dodgeball. They're playing VR dodgeball. And so they separate them. They got their stuff on. The game's going on. And what they don't know is they're not playing anybody. It's just a computer program that everybody is seeing the same thing. But what they're seeing is everybody else passing the ball to each other, using each other, and they just keep getting left out over and over and over. And they've got all these sensors on their head, and they're all wired up. And each time they get passed over, that spot just bzz, bzz, and the more times they get passed over, it just gets more aggressive and gets more aggressive. And every single person is actually experiencing that same game or that same rejection and having that same response. So it's important, I think, to understand that social rejection is very, very unhealthy, especially for an extended period of time. So regarding the church and a non-affirming church, so how in the world are you going to support somebody if you can't recognize them? How is support possible when recognition isn't? What were you thinking there? It would simply not be healthy to put myself in any church or any group that wasn't given permission to believe them or believe in them or encourage them or celebrate them. It wouldn't be healthy. Go talk to somebody who's in chronic pain. They could probably tell you what that life looks like, and how fun that is. But it is so disappointing that the Christian community, so much of the Christian community, is not a healthy place for so many. Who would have thought that? I would have never thought in my entire life, I would have never thought that the Christian community would be an unhealthy place for so many people just trying to grind it out and do their best work with the tools they were. And there'd be so many Christians going, nope, you got to bury those talents. Not comfortable with those talents. You got to leave those at the door. Nope. The question that every non-affirming church really needs to answer, I think, is what is that 2T for J point? That really is that question that I think needs to be answered. So I'm going to leave this slide up here for 1 second so you can go back and reference it, and you could come back in the comments and beat the dickens out of me if that's what you choose to do. But I would be interested in your opinion and where you think I'm going wrong. Okay, let's get on to this a little bit, that 2T for J point. Now, let's go back to this other slide. So here you are, you're this boy, but and you're patient, you're passive, and you're sensitive and nurturing, and you're just so special and you're amazing. So this is who you are. You're a leader at the church. Everybody respects you. It's great. But what if you had a few more of the temperament that maybe you shouldn't have? Okay, so what if it looked like that? Whoa, you just got a bunch more. Are you still okay? Is your person still okay to go to your church if you have that many? What about that many? Oh my gosh, that's a lot. This many? Have I gone too far? Like right here, like that's probably too far, I'm guessing. Is that Jesus right now? Jesus is going like, shut her down. No, that's too many feel-goods. Is that where it is? What is that point here? Is that better? If I take it back one more notch, are you more comfortable there? So how many talents do I need to bury before I'm, feel accepted in your church, before you feel comfortable with me? I guess that's really kind of what we need to lay out there. What part of this is deviant? Which part is deviant exactly? Or, hey, maybe it's this. Maybe it's that. Is that where I lost heaven right there? Is it the dress code in heaven? Is that where I lost it? We should have had your boy, the theologian, what is his name? Carl Thurman. We should have asked him what exactly that 2T for J, that 2 trans for Jesus point is. My gosh, we had a theologian on. We should have got some kind of a spiritual direction, right? So what is that point? I think that you should probably, spill that out there. But I do think it's a tragedy. It's a tragedy. I don't know. I will personally never, ever be surrounded by a group of people that haven't been given permission to believe me or believe in me or support me, encourage me. I will never, and I would never take anybody else into that environment. So let's go back to Matt's scenario. Now you got your little kids. You got this one little child that's extremely feminine, doesn't grow out of it, just wants to transition. And what, you just take him to church? Do you force that child into an environment that you have created and made hostile for that person, because now you've got that church thinking about repeat sex offenders in bathrooms and furries and wolves and all of those other crazy things that you talked about in this movie? Would you force your child to go into an environment that you have made hostile for them? Would you let them endure that? It would break them. It would be incredibly unkind of you to put them in that scenario. And it's, again, sad that the churches, so many churches, are not a good place for anybody in the LGBT community. Yeah, no, Kevin, what are you talking about? That's a sin. What you're talking about, you want us to tolerate sin. Hold on, those feelings are a sin? Okay, they're a sin. So what you're saying is that I'm not welcome because my sins are different than yours? That's it? So if that's a sin, my sins are different than yours, or are you that church where everybody's perfect, that church? Is that your church? Are you that one? I heard there was one out there that had nothing but perfect people, and it must be yours. Otherwise, I'm not going to have full access or, support or whatever because my sins are different. Okay, you know what? Never mind. Forget it. I'll be okay alone. Don't even worry. I don't even want to go down that road. That's a weird place to be, but it's an unfortunate thing and a reality that we are in right now. So the bottom line is, gender ideology is simply this. Gender ideologies suggest that some people have a nature, a temperament, a gender that does not align with their biological sex. They connect to a different world than their body looks like. That's all. They connect with a different world. Gender identity is who you go to bed as. Sexual orientation is who you go to bed with. These are some important definitions, and they're important because there's so much confusion around sexuality and gender identity. In fact, almost everybody has lumped them together, and it's created an absolute nightmare for the LGB group. An absolute nightmare. The transgender group has held that group back. And I know there's a lot of people in the LGBT community that feel that way. They took the transgender community in because, nobody else would, but they're two different things. So let's break this down. Now, this is why I feel strongly that the T and the I in LGBTQIA plus come out of that acronym, not because I don't support it, but because it doesn't represent the transgender issue at all. So I firmly believe that if we separated those things, it would make both of those communities stronger over time. But let's break down the LGBTQIA flag so you understand really what it means. So here we've got the flag. So this has intersex, this has trans, and this has the pride flag, which is the gay flag. Now, we have the lesbian, which refers to sexual orientation. The gay refers to sexual orientation. The bisexual refers to sexual orientation. The T, transgender, refers to social gender identity, not sexual orientation. The Q refers to sexual orientation. The I refers to your biology or your anatomy, intersex. The A is for asexual. This refers to your sexual orientation. So you can see a couple of those probably don't belong in there. And you can also see which part of that flag represents each one. So this is why I really think that the T and the I should be removed from the LGBTQIA community. Again, it is not because I don't support them. I 100% support everybody's right to love exactly who you want to love. But these groups respect each other, but they don't represent each other. They're connected by intolerance, not purpose. Not purpose at all. They're connected by intolerance. The gays allowed the trans in their community is more of a safe house than a residence. We just haven't left yet. Their purposes are different. Their social issues are different. The solutions are different. The healthcare is different. The needs of each community is different. Support for each other is different. I believe that keeping these groups bundled together handicaps both by trying to accommodate or include the other group's unrelated issues and positions. Now, this is a really sticky subject because it seems like I'm not supporting that, and that is not true at all. But the reality is it is very, very difficult to help the trans community have what they need when people are judging the trans community by however they feel about the other community. And, pride is a very gay trademark. Transgender is not a gay thing. It is a gender thing. That doesn't mean that some transgender people are not gay. It has nothing to do with that either. Everybody has the right to be who they want. But my problem with them being together and, pride parades and stuff like that is that you have, teachers or parents or aunts and uncles going to pride parades because they've got this little nephew or a niece transgender person and they want to show their support. They want to show, look, I believe in you. I'm going to this pride parade and I'm going to wave a flag. And they get to the pride parade and there's these floats and everyone's having fun and it's great. But there's these people running around, basically naked with bondage gear and gag balls and all of these sexual things, which, it is a sexual deal. Now, by the way, that does not reflect every gay person. It probably does not reflect most gay people, but that still is there because that is a celebration or a demonstration of their sexual orientation. So you go to an event that's based around sexual orientation, you're going to see sexual stuff. And here you got this teacher there to support some, transgender kid that just got put in her class and she wants to show support for. And she's watching all of this going on going, good grief, what does this child's life look like? Well, it doesn't look like that. That's not what that child's life looks like. So I think it's really confusing for a lot of people. They want to support the trans community, their cousins, their neighbors, their friends, their whoever it is. But some of them are uncomfortable being around some of these other things that are sexually geared. Again, I don't have a problem with that community or anything about that. I think there are some things that are better done in private or demonstrated in more sensitive groups. So, some of that I don't agree with being in public, but their ability to be out, their ability to be proud, their ability to say, I'm different, and I'm not afraid to be different, and I'm okay that you don't agree with it. I'm still gonna love exactly who I want to love, and I respect that, and I will absolutely defend that. But it does not represent the trans community, and it makes it very hard to take a small child and not put them in places that they could also be supported and be proud and recognized without also exposing them to things of sexual nature. That's not what they need. That is the absolute last thing they need, is to be exposed to sexual nature when they're trying to get a bearings on their switches and where they are. So I believe strongly that the T and the I should come out of that, and it would make both of those communities stronger. They would still be huge allies, and I would still do everything I could to support that community, but I would have a better opportunity to support this other community that's not sexually oriented. Okay, that's that about sexual orientation. Now, let me just end with this slide here. This is it's the history of pride. I was just looking up pride and the history of pride, and this is from the Library of Congress. And each of these 5,000 homosexuals had a new feeling of pride and self-confidence. For that was one of the main purposes of the event, to commemorate, to demonstrate, but to also raise the conscience of participating homosexuals to develop courage and feelings of dignity and self-worth. Right? I want those feelings for everybody. I want everybody to feel courage and dignity and self-worth and confidence and a higher conscience. I want that for everybody, and that's what pride represented, from the beginning. It's turned into something more expansive than that sexually, but the purpose of it I absolutely respect, and I'm glad that there was a place that gave people a chance to go and say, I'm me, and I'm going to be seen, and here I am. I just want you to be seen appropriately, doing appropriate things, but I'm glad, that you have that, and I hope that you get to feel that way as well. So that is gender identity and the different components of gender. So maybe somewhere in there you found that spot that makes people bad, that makes people, no longer qualify for heaven or whatever else, or no longer qualifies them for health. Let me know which of those temperament, what part of that you think disqualified people from healthcare and mental stability and happiness and social harmony. Which part of that was just so disgusting to you that it's not going to be acceptable. Now, if again, we need to ask the question: if we let everybody just dress to their strengths and use all of the switches they have to form their best life, to find that point where their passions and their talents cross over. If we just allowed that, what is the danger? That's a question we need to ask and answer before we disarm everybody else, or arm this community of their rights. So, next, let's keep moving on.